Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. This Friday's Crime Report is going to be very different than the ones that I've done before, because I'm not going to be focusing so much on the perpetrators of the crime as much as the victim and how the victim is being treated.
Surveillance footage is giving us a better idea of the events leading up to a double shooting in Defuniak Springs. It shows the suspect as the two victims confront him at a strip mall Tuesday evening. As News 13's Kimber Collins tells us, nearby business owners and witnesses are providing more insight into what happened. We do warn you this video may be difficult for some viewers.
One man is dead and another recovering after a 4th of July shooting outside of a shopping center on Highway 331. Surveillance footage from MoT Steakhouse shows the 25 minutes prior to 32-year-old Sipho Bennett pulling the trigger.
We know Sipho pretty well. He comes up here and eats a lot. He's very polite, very well-spoken, very educated, too. He came up here to eat. We were closed for the day. The two boys, when he started walking up, automatically started verbally assaulting him and racial profiling him and calling him names.
Between 5:35 and 5:50, the two men identified as David Brimmer and Caden Johnson come back to the local smoke shop multiple times, seen taunting Bennett from the parking lot.
They were drunk. You can see it in the video. They were drunk. They were stumbling. They were slurring, everything. He went into the smoke shop to get away from the boys. And they recorded him inside the smoke shop, still assaulting him and coming at him.
Just before the clock hits 5:51, the first shot is fired. Bennett is seen covering the weapon with a jacket and fires one more shot into the driver's side window. When the shooting happened, the victims jumped into a car, backed up, hitting another vehicle in the parking lot before leaving through the bushes and across 331 into oncoming traffic. That's when they landed at the La Rumba Mexican restaurant parking lot and police arrived. David Brimmer died after being shot in the chest. Johnson was shot in the arm and will recover. Walton County deputies located Bennett after the scene at a nearby Walgreens. Police said he confessed to the shooting and is charged with murder and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. According to police, Bennett said he was fearful the two men were going to get a gun and shoot him first. Police said officers found a gun in the victim's car across the highway.
What you just saw is a summary of an incident that happened on July 4th of this year, which is also the same day that Jadarius Rose was brutally attacked by police in Ohio. So these white supremacists see July 4th as one of their racist holy war days, a day for them to celebrate the triumph of white supremacy by targeting black people. So while Jadarius Rose was being attacked in Ohio, another racial incident was unfolding in Defuniak Springs, Florida. A black man, 32-year-old Sipho Bennett, was walking through a strip mall that he frequently visited. He's respected and well known to the business owners there, and as you've just heard, he's a valued customer of long standing. They have nothing bad to say about him at all. But July 4th of this year was different than the other days that he visited the strip mall, because this time there were two well-dressed individuals, Caden Johnson and David Brimmer, who began to recklessly eyeball Mr. Bennett and glare at him menacingly simply because he came to the strip mall. Mr. Bennett saw these hostile glares that he was getting from these two, but he's a peaceful and law-abiding citizen, unlike them, so he decided that so long as it didn't go beyond stares, he would keep his peace. Only Johnson and Brimmer were determined that this would go way beyond just stares. And these two got out of their SUV, no shirt, no shoes, no manners, and they began racially berating Mr. Bennett and threatening him. A witness says that these two were drunk, but alcohol doesn't make you a racist, and it doesn't make you harass people either. Alcohol just makes you feel free to be what you already are. And in the case of these two, it was racist, offensive, threatening, and belligerent. Nobody says that Mr. Bennett did anything to them because he didn't. He was the one being menaced. Now, the police and the white media downplay the single most important aspect of the attack on Mr. Bennett, that these two racists who were threatening him left the scene and then came back. Police didn't mention that little detail, and the white media is downplaying it altogether. They mention it only in passing as if it's not that important, when that is the entire reason that this situation escalated. The white media and the racist cops down there try to make it seem as if Mr. Bennett just started shooting at them on sight the instant he saw them. But the video makes it clear that's a lie. He did everything he could to avoid a confrontation. In fact, he went way beyond what the law requires. Under Florida's Stand Your Ground law, he had absolutely no obligation to retreat into that smoke shop where he took refuge and was hiding from these two while they were outside threatening and taunting him. But he did it anyway because he was trying to avoid a confrontation. Under Florida law, he could have stood right in front of their SUV, and the moment they made a move toward him, he could have opened fire and it would have been legal. Well, it would have been legal if he was white. The two racists who were threatening and menacing Mr. Bennett left the area in their truck. They left. But then they immediately decided to come back. See, the police, they left that little detail out. The way the racist cops try to frame it, they falsely say that the assailants were attempting to leave the scene of the altercation, but the police leave out the fact that they had already left. But then they decided to come back. They try to give the false impression to the people that, well, these two, they may have been a little bit rowdy, but they were just trying to leave. They were just trying to leave. Of course, the police would lie about this. They tell enormous lies about the murders of black people when they kill them. So, of course, when a couple of racists threaten a black man, they're going to tell lies about that too. But the truth is, Mr. Bennett was the one who did everything he could to avoid a fight, even though the law didn't require him to. And the two individuals, they were the ones who started this entire mess. They were the ones who got out of their vehicle just so that they could throw racial slurs at the man, threaten him, calling him names. This while they were outside the store waiting for him to come out. They didn't have any business at that smoke shop. They were doing that mess because they thought they saw a black person who they were going to be harassing and intimidating. And for a while they had. This entire incident, tragic though it may be, was their behavior and nothing else. If they had simply left the area and gone, that would have been the end of it, except they chose to come right back. And when they came back, their behavior hadn't changed. When they came back, they just resumed their threats and abuse and harassment of Mr. Bennett. So no matter how the police down there try to deliberately mischaracterize this event, this wasn't just one incident on their part, it was actually two. The police then went on to tell another lie by omission in their so-called report. They claimed that there was no weapon displayed by the two assailants. Now, the use of that phrase is intentionally deceptive. Police are lying by omission and they know it. People are meant to read the phrase, no weapon was displayed, and they're supposed to mistakenly think, oh, these guys didn't have a gun. Oh, that nigger, Mr. Bennett, he just shot two unarmed men. Sure, they were threatening him and harassing him, and they were verbally assaulting this man. And he, on the other hand, was peacefully waiting in the store, just trying to wait them out and hoping they go away. They did for half a minute, then immediately came back and resumed their racist barrage. Sure, they did all that, but you know what? There was no gun. They didn't have any weapon. How cowardly of him. The police want to give people that misimpression deliberately. But then immediately afterwards, the police had to admit that there was a gun in the two assailants' car. So Mr. Bennett was right, because he said the only reason that he felt that he had to open fire was because he believed that when these two thugs came back, this time they were armed, and he was right. They had a gun. He was absolutely right. They came back, and they came back carrying some heat. One of these racists died, the other one was wounded. Mr. Bennett has been arrested for defending himself. Naturally, the white media is not even trying to hide their bias. They're running headlines calling this a murder already. Now, a murder is supposed to be a legal determination. Until the issue's been adjudicated in court, they can't call it a murder. At least that's what they say to black people. They would say it's a shooting. We can't call it a murder. Hell, even after the trial, when you have these white supremacists who kill black people found guilty, the white media still refers to their mass killings as shootings. They don't refer to them as mass murders. But you got this one black man, and he's simply been charged. There has been no trial. Hell, hasn't even been the first day of a trial or even a proper hearing yet, and they're already saying this is a murder. Yeah, you can tell when the fix is in. Just like with the racist white cops down there, you got the white media trying to stack the deck against this man. Before people even know what this is about, they already want to put in their heads, this is murder, that's what it is, it's a murder. These are not headlines, these are editorials. And the two individuals who threatened and harassed him to the point that he had to go hide in a store to escape, and they basically laid siege to the store, like some white mob of old. What happened there? No charges, of course. Now, in New York, we just saw the white right say that commuters on a train have a right to kill someone merely for annoying them. Law-abiding citizens minding their own business, and they get harassed and annoyed by some stranger. Well, the white right's saying you have a right to kill that person. Well, what happened to Mr. Bennett went way beyond being merely annoyed. He had not one but two individuals who were not annoying him. They were threatening him and harassing him, and they were laying siege to a store that he was in, telling him he needs to come on out. You can't find these white right-mongers today. None of the people who are defending Daniel Penny are saying a word about Sipho Bennett. Because, of course, the only reason the white right wants to champion Daniel Penny is because he killed a black man. If Daniel Penny had been black and Jordan Neely had been white, the same Fox News who was cheerleading for Daniel Penny, they would be saying, this is the problem, this black man, probably some Black Lives Matters guy, he attacked an unarmed, homeless white man and just strangled. This is the lawlessness of New York City. That's what they would be saying. And if Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely had both been white, then you would have Fox News saying, well, this is just what you get in New York City. It's just chaos down there. They wouldn't be championing either one of them. They would just be saying it's New York City. People are strangling each other to death on the trains. It's just chaos. But the only reason that they're taking a side in the case of Daniel Penny is because he killed a black man and he's white. And we need to speak up on that because that's the only reason why. We have to say it. For the few white media outlets that have covered the case of Sipho Bennett, they don't dare put this into the context of crime in general. When the offender is white, they don't do that. They don't give us a rundown of the crime stats. How many people have been killed this year? How many hate crimes, of which black people are the vast majority of victims? They're not framing it along that. They're not saying, well, Sipho Bennett, he was set upon by two white men who began threatening him and racially harassing him. Do you know how many hate crimes there have been this year? And black people are the vast majority of the victims of hate crimes. They don't do that. They're not trying to justify what Sipho Bennett did. Nobody is calling this a hate crime at all. Sure, just because you have two white males who see a black man who has nothing to do with them, he's not harming them, and they decide that they're going to be starting to mean mug him, and then this man just walks on by, he's still minding his business, they decide to get out of their SUV and decide, well, nigger, you better not even look like you're going to be calling yourself walking with any sort of dignity. You ain't supposed to be around here, nigger. And because that happened, they lay siege to the store that he hides in. He's the one who's hiding from them in a state where he has no obligation to do anything other than stand his ground. And yet nobody's saying, you know what? The racism part of this makes this a hate crime, what they did to him. Nope. There's no attempt to link the behavior of the two races to crime in general. This is how the white media does racial conditioning of the public. We only hear certain phrases from them under certain circumstances, and those circumstances are always based on the skin color of whomever they're talking about. A black man is intentionally strangled to death by a thug in New York. The white media begins talking about crime. It's a crime issue, crime. Citizens are afraid, and citizens, they have to take things into their own hands because nobody's trying to protect them. There were no cops around. That's how it gets framed. But when the person killed is white and the accused is black, all of a sudden, there's no crime in the city all of a sudden. In fact, this has nothing to do with crime whatsoever. Nobody's even going to talk about it. Nobody's afraid for their lives. There's no public safety issues going on, and the politicians are only saying how sad it is. You won't find anybody looking at the case of Sipho Bennett and saying, well, there's consequences for behavior. They're not going to do that. And speaking of white racial narratives in regards to crime, if these two individuals had been black, then the first thing we would be hearing is nothing but, where were their parents like? How were they raised? What environment did they come from? Oh, look at these two. This is why the whole doggone country's going to hell. That's what we would be hearing. If they were black, we would be hearing about how they were dressed. You know, sagging pants. But except in their case, they didn't have any sagging pants at all. In fact, they weren't even wearing pants, weren't wearing shirts or shoes either. And absolutely nobody's saying anything about that. Apparently how individuals dress when they're in public causing a disturbance, or they're cursing at people or harassing people or threatening them or menacing them, it only seems to matter what they wear when they're black. The rest of the time, they can literally be walking around half naked, and the white media doesn't try to cast any aspersions on that. In fact, you haven't had anybody even mentioning that at all. It's a non-issue. Very interesting how these issues get covered and talked about, and what the discourse is when the person they're talking about isn't black. Now keep in mind, you got white cops who murder unarmed black people every minute of every day, and their get-out-of-jail-free card is, well, I was afraid for my life. Terrence Crutcher was murdered in cold blood, and Betty Shelby's excuse was she thought he was going to get a gun from his car. There was no gun in the car, and certainly no gun in his hands or on his person when he was killed, with his hands up. And we're told that merely her belief, her saying that she believed that she was afraid he might be trying to retrieve a weapon from the car, why, that was enough to justify her not going to prison. She can get away with murder just for saying that. Well, in the case of Mr. Bennett, you have the same circumstance, except the difference is, unlike the racist killer Betty Shelby, Sipho Bennett correctly determined that these two had come back armed. He was right. They had come back armed. They brought a gun with them. Whatever happened to stand your ground? Well, that only applies if the person is white. Mr. Bennett's being held without bond. This is not some capital murder case, and unlike the men that he was defending himself from, he had not committed a crime that day. All right. Now that said, let's go ahead and deal with an issue that I think will probably come up quite a bit. There are some people who are saying that Mr. Bennett's from Jamaica, others insinuating that perhaps he's not. The name certainly sounds like it comes from outside the U.S., that's true, but what's also true is that he is a black man who was set upon by multiple races. He took cover to escape the attackers, which the law does not require him to do. These two racists then laid siege to the place that he was hiding in, and they continued harassing and menacing him, and when they left, he thought the coast was clear, but then they immediately came back and resumed their threats and harassment. He correctly determined that they had come back armed, which they had, and he took action to ensure his safety. Mr. Bennett has not been arrested because he broke any laws. He's been arrested because these racist white police and authorities in Florida, as with everywhere else in the U.S., are enforcing their sick racialist code that a black person's not allowed to defend themselves. And of course, it did not take the police days or weeks to figure out whether or not they had a case to arrest Mr. Bennett. It took them seconds. Oh, this black guy shot at least one white person and wounded another? Well, that's a crime in and of itself. Oh, they instantaneously were able to determine that was a crime. Every white supremacist knows that the police enforce this racist code when it comes to racial violence, and these white supremacists depend on that. And every black person knows it too. This is why so many black people wind up murdered by these race killers, both in uniform and out of uniform, because when black people get attacked by some anti-black racist, every black person is aware that if they defend themselves, then the police will automatically prosecute them, no matter what the circumstances are. You have cases where white assailants walk up on unarmed black people on the street, attack them, shoot them, stab them, kill them dead in cold blood, and the racist police and DAs say, well, there's no case. This is state-sanctioned and often state-organized violence against black people. This is the police and prosecutors giving a wink and a nod to murdering black people. And every single time that a black person takes action to ensure that they're not the next victim, the police immediately throw them in handcuffs, and the DA comes at them with the hardest charges possible, and the charges never get downgraded, which is what happens with white suspects in general. The charges always get downgraded, pleaded down, the judge throws it out, they get probation. With black people, on the other hand, those charges are going to stay right where they are. In fact, they'll usually get enhanced, quote unquote, which means intensified. They'll get upgraded. And there's not going to be any plea anything. And the judge is not going to be giving probation. It's going to be the hardest time there is. See, black people understand that when it comes to self-defense, we're not just facing whatever racist is menacing us or attacking us at the time. We are also facing the racist police, DAs, and judges who back these anti-black racists up. We have no obligation to sit on our hands while we're attacked. The police and prosecutors are dyed-in-the-wool racists. This is well documented, even by the FBI. The reason the laws don't work is because the racists are in control of the apparatuses meant to administrate the law. They ignore the law when a white supremacist harms a black person, and then they violate the law and deliberately charge black people who have committed no crime. It's not about the law. It's about the skin color of the person defending themselves. Of course, it's obvious that Mr. Bennett committed no crime, and he was justified in protecting himself. And that's why the white media is downplaying the facts, and the racist police in Florida are just ignoring them altogether. Since the murder of Trayvon Martin, black Floridians understand that the police are accomplices with these crimes. And black Floridians have decided they don't want to be the next victims. That's the reason why you got people who are walking the streets armed. They weren't doing it before. But the police have made it very clear they're acting as support for anyone who wants to run up on a black person and harm someone. The police recognize that's what's happened here, and they want to use this case of self-defense as a way to reinforce that if black people think they're going to start protecting themselves, then they'll have to fight off not just racial attacks on the street, but also the racist cops and prosecutors and judges who see themselves as teaching Mr. Bennett and all black people in Florida a lesson. If you try to defend yourself, you're going to go to prison instead. And by the way, for you black conservatives out there, you know, the ones who tell us that there's no racism, please tell me where the NRA crowd is at right now. Oh yeah, the same place that they were when Philandro Castile was murdered. Black gun owners are never praised or lauded by the white right, especially when they protect themselves from racial violence. The same people who call Kyle Rittenhouse a hero, quote-unquote, they're not calling Sipho Bennett anything but a killer. Then again, the people who praise Rittenhouse are also the ones who praise every killing of a black person. Nobody on the so-called left is making a cause celeb out of this injustice either, because black people defending themselves isn't something the white left wants to see become a habit either. I don't know whether Mr. Bennett has a lawyer or whether or not he has a legal defense fund, but I know that he shouldn't be in jail right now. This is not a prosecution taking place. It is a message of racial intimidation by the state, that black people better not go thinking that they're going to be anything other than walking targets. When some racist confronts you in public, in Florida, at your home, or anywhere else, you better just go hide somewhere and hope that the same racist cops who keep protecting these criminals might do something. But as we've seen time and again, they'll stand right there while some white supremacist guns a black person down or kills them and say, well, as long as you put the knife or the gun down, you'll be okay. The white supremacists and the police have made it crystal clear exactly whose side they're on. And it's not the law-abiding black citizens. Well, I'm here to tell you that black people do have a right to be able to walk the streets without fear, without being intimidated, without being racially harassed or threatened. But what we have to understand is that these racist so-called authorities are not going to stop weaponizing their positions to attack our right to self-defense until we establish a strong culture of using our position to protect it. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Wayne Baker, Ronald Waits, Charlie, Melvinia Miles, and Earl Gates. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.